A little over 3 years ago, I made a video about the modern classics I would like to read. This is something I had forgotten about completely until one of you commented on that video last week, reminding me that I made a video 3 years ago, and both grateful and ungrateful for that, if that's the expression. But anyway, I've read most of these, or tried reading most of these books that I discussed in that video, and I thought I'd speak about that today. So we'll kick this off with Astragal, or I have still no clue how you pronounce the name of this novel, but it's still by Albertine Sarrazin, and it's also still Patti Smith's favorite novel, or I don't know that for a fact, I'm guessing that she still likes it at least, which is the reason why I bought it. And it even says on the cover that Patti Smith is involved in this book. Anyway, this is about a young woman and a young boy living in Paris and running away, sort of being half criminal. And I did enjoy reading this novel. I won't check my reading stats it's like I've read this book and my thoughts now are the thoughts that I'm stuck with. I don't want to go back to Goodreads to watch the score I gave the books. That sort of is, it never helps. So I still have fond memories of. I have visited Paris since I read this again, and I have fond memories of this adventure. Maybe I would call this like an all-time YA novel, because it is quite like a thrilling novel about two lovers in the night and all of that. My mind will wander to this book at times still, so that's a positive, I guess. A book that I recently talked about in another video is Kazuo Ishiguro and Remains of the Day, because of the Nobel Prize and all of that. I do not have that pleasant memories. I thought it was a bit boring, a bit slow. It is still one of those books that I think I might enjoy going back to. In my previous video, I talked about Kazuo Ishiguro and being one of the authors that I maybe should give another shot, but haven't done so far. Maybe I should watch the movie made from this novel. It's supposed to be a very good one, so that could be a way to go, a strategy. Reading on the inside of this novel now, it could be something I would enjoy, but it's also, I know that is the story, and it was too painfully slow, it felt like. And I didn't really connect with the characters. Maybe after some thinking I will get back to this. I could also reread Never Let Me Go, which is maybe a more suitable book. I felt like that one was a little more fast-paced, or I don't know. We'll see. Then a book I haven't yet read, and it's The Shadow of the Wind by Carlos Ruiz Zafon. I put this book in the same category as The Book Thief by Zizek, which I read this year or last year or something like that. That's from the Second World War. This is Barcelona right after the Second World War, I guess. But they give off the same vibe. And let me just get the other one. Maybe it's just the fact that the publishers chose to have these two covers as quite the similar ones. Feels like, here is death and a child, and here's a black and white picture of a man and a child. Could it be death? It could be like a symbolism that I don't get. But anyway, I do just view these books as the same book. I guess they will be very different when I start reading this one. And my project is still to have under 100 unread books in my shelf before New Year's Eve. So I very well might just pick this one up before the year ends, I guess. Let's just cross our fingers. Also, I do think that this and The Book Thief are like the same amount of popular. That has to mean something. I guess it has to be good in some way. Then it's time for The Secret History by Donna Tartt. I read this not that long ago and absolutely despised it. So this is one of the major disappointments on this list, and a more newer modern classic. But anyway, it's a bunch of students and people get killed. You should think that you could make that story quite interesting, but this book didn't manage that at all. If you want to hear more of my thoughts on this, I would go back to a book, what's it called? A wrap-up video earlier this year I'll try to link it. I felt like the story was unveiled quite early in the novel, and then you have like 400 pages left, which isn't the greatest sell-in for a book ever. And now it's time for the book that I've tried reading the most times in my shelf, like ever. It's The Master and Margarita by Mikhail Bulgako. So this is a book that I've always wanted to read because it's supposed to be quite funny and entertaining at the same time that it's like a serious themed book. But I just can't get myself past the first pages. I've even bought like 2 copies of this. So the first one was English, the second one had a small font, and this is in Norwegian with the bigger font. So I try. And I've also tried listening to this on audiobook, but it hasn't helped. But I'm refusing to give this up. At this point, I can't really unhaul it. I have to try to read it because I've just tried so hard before. That doesn't make any sense, but still, this is a project that I'm willing to sacrifice a lot of time to get through. I think the tagline that made me want to read this book was that the devil arrives in Moscow with a beautiful naked witch and a talking cat. Seemed like a funny introduction to a novel, and that is still what motivates me to try to finish reading this one. Yeah, still after 3 years. But maybe this... Well, we're nearing the end of this year, but I still live in the hope as always. A book that I haven't yet read, but is still resting on my Kindle is The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. I'm guessing that I'll never read that book because I watched the movie. And this is something I've talked about several times that I don't really... I've only tried this once, reading a book after I've watched the movie, and that was A Man Called Ove by Fredrik Backman. Ended up loving both the movie and the book, of course. But that's a special occasion. I don't think The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy will be my read at any time, because I have too many books, and if I feel like I know the story from before, I'm not that interested. But maybe, we'll see. But a book I've read and currently no longer have is The House of the Spirits by Isabel Allende. I've read one of her books before when I visited Chile. I'm sure I mentioned this in the previous video, but this I gave up. It's the magical realism again that gets to me, and gets to me hard, if that's the expression. I couldn't take it. I read a couple of pages, can't tell you what that book is about. I didn't like it at all, and I realized that very quickly, which helps my physical and mental health, I guess. So that book is no longer with us. But a book that still is standing in my shelf, even after I've read it, is The Confederacy of Dunces by John Kennedy Toole, about this character. And I say this in a very... I've never felt that word more than when talking about this book, because our main boy, Ignatius, is really a character with a big C. He goes around in, what's the place, New Orleans, and he stirs up troubles. But it's also the tone. It's quite a funny novel, but it's a lot of layers. So it's also a novel with a main character that you feel a little bit sorry for, because he's, what's the name? He's trying a bit too hard, and he is a little bit too much, and it just doesn't always feel right. Also, there's a lot of layering politics and the world's status of the world and all that. I quite enjoyed this, but I felt too dumb to read it, if I'm being honest. Maybe I felt like I should have read it slower, and also several times. Even though I laughed out loud quite a few times, it still has this seriousness to it that makes it worthy of a reread at some point, I'm quite sure. So we'll probably get back to this if I live to be 80 or 90 years old. That's at least my prediction. Then it's Devil on the Cross by Ngũgĩ Thiong'o. So he won the Nobel Prize for Literature some years ago. I bought it as a sort of a, you won the prize, I want to read your books. Probably the first and last time I did so. Haven't yet read this, and yeah, I've read 2 Nobel Prize winners this month also, but haven't yet read this. But maybe he will be a part of the pile that goes with me when I finish this year. Let's just see. Still, I want to read this book, so I haven't unhauled it yet, but we'll see what happens. Should probably have bought it in Norwegian when thinking about it. Some books are better in your first language, I find. But I don't think that will be the case for our last author today, and that's Flannery O'Connor, A Good Man is Hard to Find, a short story still resting on my Kindle. But I do think that I will enjoy that story quite a lot, because it feels like it has the right vibe. But we'll see. I'm happy having read over half of these at least, or tried reading over half of these. So we'll see what modern classics I will talk about next time I talk about this topic. If you have suggestions for modern classics I should read, and if you watch my channel regularly and you know what kind of books I like, please recommend books you think I like. And what is your favorite modern classic, or what modern classic did you read this year? A lot of questions that makes for a lot of potential answers in the comment section. That's my sell-in for my own comment section. I do enjoy reading your comments, and often I feel, what's the word in English? Let's have a Google search. Insufficient is probably the word I'm looking for. I feel insufficient when I'm answering your comments, but I do still like to read your comments. So thank you to all of you that comment on my videos. Thank you to all of you that watch my videos. I hope you have a very pleasant weekend, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye!